In the early 20th century, the rules were simple. Black women were relegated to the back-breaking toil of domestic service, the wash basin, the kitchen, the cotton field. But one woman dared to break those rules, to create her own economy, and to redefine what was possible for her race and her gender. Sarah Breedlove would become Madam C.J. Walker, a beauty titan and America's first female self-made millionaire. Born in Delta, Louisiana in 1867, Sarah was a historical anomaly, the first child in her family born free after the Emancipation Proclamation. Her parents, Owen and Minerva Breedlove, were former slaves turned sharecroppers. But freedom did not bring comfort. Orphaned by age 7, Sarah moved in with her older sister, Louvenia, and the two worked in the cotton fields. The struggles of her youth led to an early marriage at age 14, a choice she later said she made to escape the abuse of her brother-in-law. By age 20, she was a widowed mother to her daughter, Lelia, and forced to choose between the cotton fields and the stifling work of a laundress in St. Louis, Missouri. She chose the washboard. "I was at my tubs one morning with a heavy wash before me," she recalled. "As I bent over the washboard and looked at my arms buried in soap suds, I said to myself, what are you going to do when you grow old and your back gets stiff? Who is going to take care of your little girl?" For over a decade, Sarah's days were a relentless cycle of hard labor, earning just over $1 a day. Yet her determination was fierce. She saved enough to send Lelia to public school, determined her daughter would have the education she never did. Her personal crisis began in the 1890s, a severe scalp condition and balding, a common affliction at a time when indoor plumbing and regular bathing were still rare luxuries. She sought a solution desperately, trying countless remedies. This quest led her to Annie Turnbow Malone, another black entrepreneur selling hair products. Sarah worked as a sales agent for Malone, gaining invaluable experience in the burgeoning black beauty market and learning the chemistry of hair preparations. In 1905, Sarah relocated to Denver, Colorado, and decided to launch her own product. Her first creation, Madam Walker's Wonderful Hair Grower, was a medicated pomade with petroleum jelly and sulfur. Designed not for straightening, but to heal the scalp diseases that caused hair loss, the product worked, and the demand exploded. After marrying Charles Joseph Walker, a newspaperman, she rebranded herself. She adopted the sophisticated French title Madame and used his name, creating the distinct identity, Madam C.J. Walker. Charles helped with advertising, placing aggressive and savvy ads in black newspapers that announced the arrival of a new authority in hair care. The foundation of her fortune was not luck, but a relentless hands-on marketing strategy. Madam Walker traveled across the South and Southeast, enduring Jim Crow laws, staging highly theatrical lecture demonstrations at churches, lodges, and community centers. She didn't just sell a jar of cream. She sold a comprehensive approach she called the Walker system. This system emphasized 4 key elements: regular washing with a vegetable shampoo, a specialized temple grower for the scalp, the use of hot iron combs for styling, and her trademark pomade. It was a complete package, a commitment to cleanliness and loveliness, as a mark of respectability and pride for African American women. In 1910, Walker made a critical business decision, moving her operations from Pittsburgh to Indianapolis, Indiana. This was no accident. Indianapolis was the crossroads of America, a major rail hub that was perfect for her expanding mail-order business. Crucially, it was also home to a burgeoning, educated black business class who could help her manage her growing corporation. She built a new headquarters for the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company, complete with a factory, a beauty school she called Lelia College, and a research laboratory. She had shifted from a traveling peddler to a fully incorporated industrialist, creating high-quality products under her own watchful eye. Madam Walker's greatest innovation may not have been her product, but her distribution network. She trained thousands of black women as Walker agents or beauty culturalists, providing them with lucrative work and an escape from the oppressive domestic labor sector. These agents did more than sell. They were community leaders teaching hygiene, self-care, and professional skills. She instilled a fierce pride in her agents, offering healthy commissions and competitive bonuses. By the time of her death, she had employed an estimated 40,000 agents in the United States, Central America, and the Caribbean. I'm not satisfied in making money for myself. I endeavor to provide employment for hundreds of the women of my race. This quote perfectly encapsulates the dual purpose of her business model: profit and empowerment. Walker's belief was that financial success came with a moral obligation. Her giving started before she was a millionaire, rooted in the long tradition of collective giving in Black communities. She donated substantial sums to the NAACP's anti-lynching fund, the Black YMCA in Indianapolis, and to various Black schools and colleges. Her generosity was a deliberate act of racial uplift, challenging the prevailing notion that Black people could not be powerful philanthropists. Walker leveraged her influence for political change. After the horrific East St. Louis race massacre of 1917, she joined a delegation of prominent Harlem citizens to travel to Washington, D.C. and petition President Woodrow Wilson. They demanded that he support federal anti-lynching legislation. She also urged her vast network of Walker agents to get involved in civil and human rights. At her 1917 convention, the agents passed a resolution denouncing lynching, using their collective economic voice to demand justice. Her company was an engine for commerce, but it was also a platform for activism. In 1918, in an unprecedented move, Madam Walker built her dream home, a $250,000 Italianate mansion named Villa Lewaro in Irvington-on-Hudson, New York. It was designed by Vertner Tandy, one of the nation's few Black architects, and situated near the estates of America's wealthiest families, including the Rockefellers. This was a profound statement. It was a visible, undeniable declaration of Black success and refinement in a world that sought to deny both. Walker intended for the mansion to be a showplace for the race and a gathering space for Black luminaries and intellectuals, directly influencing the burgeoning Harlem Renaissance. Madam C.J. Walker died at Villa Lewaro on May 25, 1919, at the age of 51, due to hypertension and kidney failure. Though reports varied on her exact worth, she was recognized as a self-made millionaire, a status unprecedented for a Black woman in America. Her funeral was a dignified affair, attended by leaders of the business, civil rights, and religious communities. Her daughter, Alelia Walker, a vibrant socialite and patron of the arts, inherited the company presidency. Alelia ensured the completion of her mother's final grand vision, the Madam Walker Theater Center in Indianapolis, which opened in 1927. The Walker Building housed the factory, a salon, a drugstore, and a lavish theater, making it a cultural and economic anchor for the Indianapolis Black community. It stands today as a National Historic Landmark, a living testament to its founder's dual mission of commerce and culture. Madam C.J. Walker's legacy is not just the products she sold, but the economic ecosystem she created. She didn't wait for opportunities. She created them, paving the way for generations of women entrepreneurs. Her life is a powerful, inspiring story of resilience, vision, and the unwavering belief that business success must be a catalyst for social justice. The self-made millionaire, the philanthropist, the activist, Madam C.J. Walker's indelible mark on American history continues to inspire. In a nation built on the promise of freedom, but tragically steeped in the cruelty of slavery, one woman defied the very foundation of the South. She was illiterate, 5 feet tall, and suffered from chronic, debilitating pain. Yet she became a strategist, a conductor, a general, and a spy. Her name was Araminta Ross, but history knows her as Harriet Tubman, the Moses of her people. This is the story of the woman who traded her own safety for the liberation of hundreds, leading them out of bondage again and again. Born Araminta Minty Ross around 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland, she knew only labor and violence from her earliest memory. The fifth of 9 children, her parents, Harriet Ritt Green and Ben Ross, were enslaved by the Brodess and later the Thompson family. Her life began as property, valued only for the work her body could produce. The daily threat of sale, of being permanently separated from her parents and siblings, was the psychic wound of her childhood. The Deep South's economic engine ran on this fear and the constant dismantling of black families. This instability forged in Minty a fierce loyalty to her family and a profound hatred for the system that held them. The formative event of her young life occurred when she was just a teenager. Sent to a dry goods store, she stepped between an overseer and a runaway enslaved person. The overseer threw a 2-pound metal weight, striking Minty squarely in the head. The injury was devastating and permanent. For the rest of her life, she would suffer from severe headaches, narcoleptic seizures, and sudden blackouts. But for Harriet, this trauma was also a spiritual awakening. She interpreted her seizures as powerful religious visions, believing she was communicating directly with God. These visions fueled her conviction that she was divinely chosen for a great task, to deliver her people to freedom. Around 1844, Minty married John Tubman, a free black man. However, Maryland was still a slave state, and their marriage provided no protection for her or her family. After her enslaver, Edward Brodess, died, the terrifying prospect of her sale to the Deep South loomed. This peculiar institution allowed no security, even in love. In 1849, Minty changed her name to Harriet after her mother, and facing imminent sale, made her decision. Her husband refused to leave. He was free and content to stay. But Harriet's commitment to self-determination superseded her marriage. She said later, "There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other." Harriet Tubman did not wait for help. She ran, following the North Star and relying on an intricate, loosely organized network of safe houses and secret routes, the Underground Railroad. She traversed 90 miles through swamps and woods, navigating a landscape where every shadow was a danger, and every white person a potential enemy. When she finally crossed the line into Pennsylvania, a free state, the contrast was staggering. I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything, she recalled. She was finally free. But the mission had just begun. Part 2. The Conductor. Most formerly enslaved persons who reached the North focused on building their new lives. Harriet Tubman focused on the people she had left behind. In a radical act of selflessness and bravery, she decided to return to the South. Her first successful mission was rescuing her niece and her children. From 1850 to 1860, Tubman made approximately 13 return trips to the eastern shore of Maryland, personally leading over 70 people to freedom and giving instructions to perhaps another 70. She became the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad, a network of abolitionists and safe houses stretching across the nation. Tubman was more than brave. She was a brilliant strategist. She planned her missions for the winter months, when the nights were longer and the swamps frozen solid. She worked exclusively on Saturdays, knowing that news of the escape wouldn't be printed in newspapers until Monday, buying the fugitives crucial time. Her methods were strict and demanding. She carried a pistol, not just for protection from enslavers, but to enforce discipline. She famously stated, "You go on or die." In her world, a single tired, terrified person turning back risked the capture and murder of the entire group and all those who helped them. In 1850, the U.S. Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act, escalating the danger exponentially. The law made it a federal crime to aid a runaway and required law enforcement, even in free states, to arrest and return escaped enslaved people. This pushed Tubman's operations all the way to Canada. The reward for her capture swelled to over $40,000, an enormous sum for the time. But she was never caught, earning her the nickname Moses for her parallel to the biblical figure who led his people out of Egyptian bondage. Her success she attributed to her divine guidance. Tubman's work was supported by a dedicated network. She found powerful allies among white abolitionists like Thomas Garrett in Delaware and Gerrit Smith in New York. She became an icon and an active participant in the wider abolition movement, consulting with major figures like Frederick Douglass and John Brown. "I know of no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than Harriet Tubman," said Frederick Douglass. Part 3. War and Legacy. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Harriet Tubman immediately offered her services to the Union Army. Her deep knowledge of the South's terrain, her absolute mastery of secrecy, and her intelligence network made her invaluable. She served in South Carolina as a nurse, a cook, a scout, and a spy. Her role as a spy was critical. She organized reconnaissance missions, gathering intelligence from formerly enslaved people behind Confederate lines, providing the Union with crucial information on troop movements and supply lines. In 1863, Tubman achieved a feat unmatched by any woman, before or since. She became the first woman to lead an armed military operation in U.S. history, the Combahee River Raid. She guided 3 Union gunboats up the Combahee River to disrupt Confederate supply lines and gather intelligence. The key raid was a resounding success. They destroyed bridges and plantations, seizing millions of dollars in supplies and, most significantly, freeing over 700 enslaved people in a single night. She stood on the deck directing the newly freed people, a real-life Moses leading a massive exodus. Despite her tireless service, both as a conductor and a military asset, Tubman was paid only $200 over 3 years. After the war, she spent decades fighting the U.S. government for the back pay and a military pension she was owed, a harsh reminder of the systemic devaluation of black service and female leadership. In her later years, Tubman moved to Auburn, New York, focusing on humanitarian work. She was a tireless advocate for women's suffrage, partnering with figures like Susan B. Anthony, arguing that her own life was proof of a woman's right to full citizenship. Harriet Tubman purchased land in Auburn and dedicated her final years to establishing the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged, a facility for poor and elderly Black Americans. She spent the last years of her life struggling financially, often supported only by donations and the sale of her biography. She died in 1913, surrounded by friends and family, and was buried with full military honors. She left behind no vast fortune, no corporate empire, but a legacy infinitely more valuable, the undeniable evidence that courage, faith, and moral conviction can change the course of history. Part 4. Legacy and the Enduring Symbol. Harriet Tubman never lost a passenger. Her operational success rate remains one of the most astonishing achievements of the Civil War era. She was a woman who was considered property, yet she commanded troops and outsmarted the most powerful slave catchers in America. Her life is the ultimate contradiction to the notion of servitude. Her story transcends the Civil War. It is a fundamental American epic of self-liberation and revolutionary action. Tubman wasn't merely a helper. She was a CEO of freedom, a master tactician who risked everything to make the American promise of liberty a reality. The life of Harriet Tubman shows us that the greatest power often comes not from wealth or political titles, but from an unyielding moral compass. She remains the single most recognizable and revered figure of the Underground Railroad, a constant reminder that true leadership is often found not in the halls of power, but in the most dangerous corners of the battlefield. From a shackled slave named Minty to the celebrated military commander known as Moses, her lives in time proves that one dedicated soul can fundamentally shift the moral landscape of a nation. If you found yourself captivated by the journey of this extraordinary leader, please like this video and subscribe to Lives in Time. Your support helps us uncover more vital and untold biographies, from the ancient empires of China to the revolutionary heart of America. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the figures who truly shaped the world. And feel free to leave a comment about who should we feature in our next video. In a nation built on constitutional ideals, but divided by racial injustice, the scales of justice were brutally unbalanced. For millions, freedom was a promise, but equality was a lie. Yet one man, armed not with a gun but with a legal brief, took on the system. He was a lawyer, a strategist, a fearless crusader, and ultimately a Supreme Court justice. His name was Thurgood Marshall, the legal architect of equality. This is the story of how he used the very laws of the land to dismantle segregation, case by agonizing case, forever changing America. Born Thurgood Marshall in 1908 in Baltimore, Maryland, he quickly shortened his name to Thurgood. His father, William Marshall, was a railroad porter who loved to debate, instilling in young Thurgood a passion for argument and a deep understanding of justice. His mother, Norma, was a teacher, emphasizing the power of education. Marshall experienced segregation firsthand, but it was not the violent Jim Crow of the Deep South. Baltimore's segregation was insidious, subtle, but equally pervasive. He attended segregated schools, but, critically, had parents who challenged him, pushed him, and nurtured his intellect. Marshall excelled academically at Lincoln University, a historically black college, but his ambition to become a lawyer faced an immediate, infuriating barrier. He was rejected from the University of Maryland Law School because of his race. This personal slight would fuel a lifelong fight against injustice. Instead, he enrolled at Howard University School of Law, a segregated institution that, under the brilliant leadership of Dean Charles Hamilton Houston, was becoming the intellectual powerhouse of the civil rights movement. Houston envisioned using the law itself as a weapon against segregation, and Marshall became his star pupil, his protege. After graduating first in his class, Marshall immediately put Houston's teachings into practice. One of his first cases was representing Donald Gaines Murray, a qualified black student denied admission to the University of Maryland Law School. It was a full-circle moment, directly challenging the very institution that had rejected him. Marshall and Houston won the case in 1935, forcing the university to admit Murray. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a crucial early crack in the separate but equal doctrine established by Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, proving that segregated facilities, even when seemingly equal, inherently caused harm. His success caught the attention of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In 1936, he joined their legal team, eventually becoming its chief counsel. This was not a desk job. Marshall packed his bags and began a harrowing journey across the American South. A lone black lawyer venturing into hostile territory, he would drive tens of thousands of miles, often at night, arguing cases in segregated courtrooms, risking his life to defend African Americans against trumped-up charges, police brutality, and discriminatory laws. His legal brief became his shield, his intellect, his sword, and his courage. Marshall and Houston developed a brilliant, long-term legal strategy to dismantle segregation. They didn't aim for one massive victory, but a series of incremental challenges, picking away at Plessy versus Ferguson piece by piece. They first targeted graduate and professional schools, where the separate but equal claim was impossible to maintain. It was impossible for states to create truly equal law schools or medical schools for a handful of black students. Each victory forced states to integrate or establish absurdly expensive, inferior separate facilities, highlighting the inherent inequality. Marshall's work was incredibly dangerous. He faced constant threats, racism, and intimidation. There are chilling accounts of him narrowly escaping lynch mobs, having to hide in safe houses, or being driven out of towns under the cover of darkness. Yet, he never wavered. His dedication to justice was stronger than his fear. He understood that every case, every courtroom appearance, was not just about legal precedent, but about the lives and dignity of real people. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, Marshall and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund had laid significant groundwork. They had won cases like Sweat versus Painter and McLaurin versus Oklahoma State Regents, which chipped away at segregation in higher education. These victories demonstrated that even when facilities were nominally equal, the intangible harms of segregation, the sense of inferiority, the exclusion from the mainstream, made separate inherently unequal. This would become the bedrock of their greatest challenge, public school segregation. In 1954, all the years of painstaking legal work culminated in a single and monumental case before the U.S. Supreme Court, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. This was the ultimate challenge to Plessy versus Ferguson, arguing that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. Marshall led the legal team, facing immense pressure and the eyes of a nation. His argument was powerful and simple. Segregation generated a feeling of inferiority among black children, harming their motivation and development. This psychological damage, he argued, made separate inherently unequal. On May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court delivered a unanimous decision. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Brown v. Board of Education overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, declaring state-sponsored segregation in public schools unconstitutional. It was a monumental victory, a legal earthquake that shook the foundations of American society. For Thurgood Marshall, it was the culmination of decades of tireless work, a testament to his legal brilliance and unwavering commitment to justice. The decision ignited the civil rights movement, providing the legal framework for activism across the nation. But victory in court did not mean immediate equality on the ground. The South met Brown with fierce resistance, enacting massive resistance campaigns. Segregationists vowed to defy the ruling, leading to confrontations like the Little Rock Nine, where federal troops were needed to enforce desegregation. Marshall continued his fight, shifting his focus to ensuring the Brown decision was actually implemented. He argued follow-up cases, battling states that attempted to circumvent the ruling, reminding the nation that judicial decrees required consistent enforcement. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy nominated Marshall to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. After a contentious confirmation process, where Southern senators tried to block his appointment, Marshall was confirmed. He served for 4 years, authoring over 100 opinions, none of which were overturned by the Supreme Court. His move from civil rights advocate to judge was a testament to his legal acumen and his ability to transcend partisanship. Despite his fierce commitment to justice, he was no longer just arguing the law. He was helping shape it from the bench. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson appointed Marshall as the Solicitor General of the United States, the nation's top lawyer, responsible for arguing on behalf of the federal government before the Supreme Court. This was an unprecedented achievement for an African American. In this role, Marshall won 14 of the 19 cases he argued, further solidifying his reputation as one of the most brilliant legal minds of his generation. His journey, from a student rejected by his state's law school to the lead lawyer for the entire U.S. government, was nothing short of miraculous. In 1967, President Johnson nominated Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court of the United States. After another grueling and racially charged confirmation battle, he was confirmed, becoming the first African-American Supreme Court justice in history. For 24 years, Justice Marshall served on the nation's highest court, becoming a consistent voice for individual rights, civil liberties, and criminal justice reform. He often found himself in dissent as the court shifted right, but his opinions were always powerful, articulate, and rooted in his lived experience of injustice. Thurgood Marshall retired from the Supreme Court in 1991, passing away in 1993. His legacy is immeasurable. He didn't just win cases. He fundamentally altered the fabric of American law and society. He created a pathway for future generations to pursue justice, armed with the very Constitution he fought to uphold. From being denied entry to law school to sitting on the Supreme Court, Marshall's life is a testament to the power of perseverance, the force of legal strategy, and the unwavering belief that justice, though often delayed, can ultimately prevail. His lives in time proved that the promise of equal justice under law could indeed become a reality. In a rapidly industrializing America, where speed and danger went hand in hand, two revolutionary inventions saved countless lives and transformed modern infrastructure. Both came from the mind of one man. He was an entrepreneur, an inventor, and a strategist. But because of the color of his skin, he often had to hide his identity to sell his genius. His name was Garrett Morgan, the unsung inventor. This is the story of how a son of formerly enslaved people built a business empire and designed the future of public safety. Garrett Augustus Morgan was born in Paris, Kentucky in 1877, the seventh of 11 children to formerly enslaved parents. His formal schooling ended after the 5th grade, but his mechanical curiosity did not. At age 14, he left home, determined to find better opportunities in the booming industrial North. He landed in Cincinnati, where he hired a private tutor to continue his education while working as a handyman. His natural aptitude lay in the mechanical arts, specifically the inner workings of sewing machines and industrial equipment. This hands-on knowledge would form the basis of his future success. By 1907, Morgan had moved to Cleveland, Ohio, a manufacturing hub, and opened his own sewing machine repair shop. He was successful, but his ambition was far greater. He observed a common problem in his clothing business. The friction generated by needle-on cloth often damaged the thread. Trying to find a lubricant to reduce the friction, Morgan experimented with a chemical solution. While applying it to a piece of fabric, he noticed that the coarse fibers became noticeably smoother. He tested the solution on his neighbor's dog's fur and then on himself. The result was a solution that chemically straightened hair, the G.A. Morgan Hair Refining Cream. Morgan was now an entrepreneur. With his wife Mary, he created a massive marketing effort, establishing the G.A. Morgan Hair Refining Company. He used his profits to purchase a house, a car, and eventually founded the first African-American newspaper in Cleveland, the Cleveland Call. But Morgan's mind was always on innovation that solved larger public problems. While the hair cream funded his stability, his true calling lay in saving lives. Hair calling that would produce his most famous and essential invention. As cities grew and industry expanded, fire and noxious fumes became a daily threat. Morgan observed firemen and emergency workers struggling to enter smoke-filled buildings. The heat and toxic air made rescue attempts nearly impossible. Using his mechanical knowledge, Morgan began to design a simple yet ingenious safety device. A hood that covered the wearer's head, connecting via a tube to a long filtering device that touched the ground, drawing clean air from below the smoke line. He called it the Morgan Safety Hood. His safety hood, patented in 1914, was a landmark in safety technology, a precursor to the modern gas mask. But selling a sophisticated piece of equipment invented by a black man in early 20th century America was almost impossible. Morgan employed a sharp strategy. He often hired a white man to pose as the inventor during demonstrations, while Morgan himself would enter the sealed, smoke-filled room wearing the hood. Once he emerged unharmed, the white salesman would take the credit and the orders. In July 1916, tragedy struck Cleveland. Workers drilling a water tunnel beneath Lake Erie hit a pocket of natural gas. A massive explosion trapped over a dozen men hundreds of feet beneath the lake, filling the tunnel with toxic fumes. Rescue attempts failed repeatedly. Finally, a messenger rushed to Morgan. Without hesitation, Morgan, along with his brother Frank, donned the Morgan safety hoods and plunged into the poisonous environment. He personally led the charge, rescuing workers, including the final survivors. Morgan was instantly declared a hero. His bravery was undeniable, but the revelation of his race immediately impacted the commercial sales of the hood, which was ironically nicknamed the gas mask. Southern fire departments, while recognizing its effectiveness, often canceled their orders upon learning the inventor was African American. Despite the racial setbacks, the invention was a success. Morgan's company sold the hoods around the country, and the US government used a similar design extensively during World War I. The greatest technological revolution of the era was the automobile. As cars replaced horses, urban streets became chaotic and deadly. Police officers had only two positions to direct traffic: stop and go. This led to constant collisions, as drivers often misjudged the transition. Morgan, witnessing a particularly bad crash at a local intersection, realized the essential flaw in the system: the sudden shift from stop to go. Morgan applied his logical, problem-solving mind to the streets. His solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Add a third position, caution, to the traffic signal. This warning signal allowed drivers and pedestrians a moment to clear the intersection before the flow of traffic changed. Morgan applied his logical, problem-solving mind to the streets. His solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Add a third position, caution, to the traffic signal. In 1923, Morgan secured a patent for his electric traffic signal, the predecessor to the three-color traffic lights used globally today. His design included the all-important neutral signal, preventing collisions and making urban travel safer for everyone. Unlike the safety hood, the traffic light was easier to market on its sheer necessity. Recognizing the national need, Morgan sold the rights to his invention to General Electric for a substantial $40,000, a huge sum for the era, securing his financial future. Morgan was a shrewd businessman and investor. He invested in real estate and continued his community involvement, never forgetting his roots or the need for African American empowerment. Morgan was dedicated to uplifting the black community in Cleveland. He was a charter member of the Cleveland NAACP and actively engaged in politics, supporting local candidates and registering voters. He understood that economic success provided a platform for political change. His newspaper, the Cleveland Call, became a vital source of information and advocacy for the black middle class. Despite his monumental contributions to public safety, Garrett Morgan's name remained largely obscure for decades. His inventions, the traffic light and the safety hood, were integrated into society so quickly and seamlessly that the identity of the inventor was often forgotten or ignored. His story is a classic case of an African American inventor whose genius saved lives and made fortunes, but whose personal fame was suppressed by the prevailing racial climate of the early 20th century. Garrett Morgan's life, spanning from slavery's aftermath to the dawn of the civil rights era, is a testament to the power of relentless ingenuity. He solved problems not just for profit, but for humanity, ensuring that millions could breathe easier, whether escaping a fire or navigating a busy street. He died in 1963, a year before the passage of the Civil Rights Act, having earned his success not with a weapon or a protest sign, but with a patent and a promise of a safer world. The legacy of Garrett Morgan is built into the fabric of the modern world. If you were fascinated by the genius of this unsung inventor, please like this video and subscribe to Lives in Time. Your support helps us uncover the vital, untold stories of innovators who changed history. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive.
He was born into bondage, named after a man he barely knew. He held no patents on his most famous inventions, sought no personal wealth, and preferred the quiet solitude of his laboratory. Yet, his ideas saved an entire region from economic collapse, redefined agriculture, and inspired millions. He unlocked the secrets of the soil, revealing the hidden potential in the most humble of crops. His name was George Washington Carver, the prophet of the peanut. This is the story of the extraordinary scientist, inventor, and humanitarian who turned plants into prosperity, transforming lives from the fields of the South to the halls of Congress. George Washington Carver was born into slavery around 1864 in Diamond, Missouri, on the farm of Moses and Susan Carver. His early life was fraught with danger. As an infant, he and his mother were kidnapped by Confederate raiders. Though Moses Carver eventually ransomed George back, his mother was never found. A sickly child, George was not strong enough for field work. Instead, Susan Carver, a kind and educated woman, taught him to read and write. Young George spent hours in the woods observing plants and nature, earning him the nickname the plant doctor from local farmers who sought his advice. After emancipation, Carver's driving passion was education. He yearned for knowledge. He left the Carver farm at a young age, drifting through the Midwest, working odd jobs to support himself while continually seeking schools that would accept him. His journey was long and difficult, marked by racial prejudice. He was accepted into Highland College in Kansas, only to be rejected upon arrival when they discovered he was black. Undeterred, he pressed on, eventually gaining acceptance to Simpson College in Iowa, initially to study art. At Simpson, a professor recognized his botanical talent and encouraged him to transfer to Iowa State Agricultural College, now Iowa State University. In 1891, George Washington Carver became the first African-American student at Iowa State. He excelled, earning his bachelor's and master's degrees in botany and agricultural science. His professors were so impressed by his research on fungal diseases of plants that they invited him to join the faculty as the first African-American faculty member at Iowa State. It was a remarkable achievement, but his greatest contribution was yet to come. In 1896, a letter arrived from Booker T. Washington, the influential founder of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Washington offered Carver a position as director of the agricultural department with a clear mission to save the impoverished, cotton-ravaged farmlands of the South and uplift its poor black farmers. Carver accepted, seeing it as a divine calling. He arrived in a region devastated by generations of monoculture cotton farming, which had depleted the soil and trapped farmers in endless poverty. His challenge was immense, but his genius was equal to it. Carver quickly recognized the root of the South's agricultural crisis. Cotton had stripped the soil of vital nutrients, particularly nitrogen. His solution was simple, yet revolutionary: crop rotation. He urged farmers to plant peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soybeans in rotation with cotton. These soil-enriching crops, known as legumes, returned nitrogen to the soil, making it fertile again. But there was a new problem. When farmers adopted his methods, they soon found themselves with mountains of peanuts and sweet potatoes that no one knew what to do with. This is where Carver's true genius as an inventor shone. He retreated to his rudimentary laboratory at Tuskegee, which he often called his kitchen lab. Determined to find new uses for these abundant crops, he experimented tirelessly, transforming raw materials into entirely new products. From the peanut, he developed over 300 products: milk, flour, coffee, ink, plastics, dyes, cosmetics, medicines, and even synthetic rubber. For the sweet potato, he created over 100 products: flour, vinegar, molasses, and even postage stamp glue. Carver wasn't just an inventor, he was an educator. To reach the poor, often illiterate farmers who couldn't come to Tuskegee, he created the Jessup Agricultural Wagon. This horse-drawn classroom was packed with scientific instruments, seed samples, and cooking demonstrations. He traveled through rural communities, teaching farmers practical techniques, demonstrating how to make peanut butter or sweet potato flour, and showing them how to increase their yields. He brought scientific knowledge directly to the people who needed it most, empowering them to escape poverty. Carver's innovations gained national attention. In 1921, the United Peanut Association of America invited him to testify before Congress on the benefits of the peanut and to lobby for a protective tariff. They needed a powerful voice, and Carver delivered. Dressed in a simple suit carrying a satchel of his peanut-derived products, he captivated the room. He spoke for an hour and a half, demonstrating the peanut's vast potential. His testimony was instrumental in securing the tariff, protecting American peanut farmers, and cementing his national fame. Unlike most inventors, Carver intentionally sought few patents for his discoveries, typically only 3. He believed that knowledge should be freely shared to benefit humanity, especially the poor farmers he dedicated his life to serving. He famously said, "God gave me the peanut, and I found the uses for it. I will not put my hand on God's work." His philosophy was one of selfless service, prioritizing community uplift over personal enrichment. Carver's reputation spread globally. He exchanged letters with Mahatma Gandhi, advising him on nutrition and sustainable agriculture. During India's struggle for independence, he consulted with Henry Ford, exploring alternative crops and industrial uses for peanuts, like plastic and rubber for automobiles. His influence transcended race and national boundaries. He was a beacon of scientific excellence and practical application, proving that intellect and innovation knew no color. Carver's long tenure at Tuskegee was sustained by his deep respect for Booker T. Washington's vision of industrial education and economic self-sufficiency for African Americans. While they sometimes differed on academic freedom versus vocational focus, their shared goal united them. Carver was the scientific engine behind Tuskegee's agricultural mission, providing the tangible tools and knowledge that Washington preached. Their partnership was foundational to the Institute's success and its impact on the South. In his later years, Carver's health declined, but his mind remained sharp. He used his accumulated wealth to establish the George Washington Carver Foundation at Tuskegee, ensuring his research and educational mission would continue. He passed away in 1943. His tombstone at Tuskegee fittingly reads, "He could have added fortune to fame, but caring for neither, he found happiness in being helpful to the world." Carver's life is a profound testament to the power of education, perseverance, and applied science. He took the most impoverished land and the most overlooked crops, and through his ingenuity extracted wealth, health, and dignity. He showed a nation that true genius lies not just in discovery, but in the selfless application of that knowledge for the betterment of all. The prophet of the peanut left a legacy far richer than any fortune. It was a fortune etched into the very soil of America. The lessons of George Washington Carver resonate to this day. If you were inspired by the journey of this extraordinary scientist, please like this video and subscribe to Lives in Time. Your support helps us uncover the vital stories of innovators and humanitarians who truly shaped our world. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive.
In an era defined by silence and fear, one journalist dared to speak the most dangerous truth in America. She risked her life not to report the news, but to investigate the terror designed to oppress her people. She was a teacher, an orator, a suffragist, and a founder of modern civil rights activism. Her name was Ida B. Wells, and this is the story of the uncompromising crusader who used her pen as a weapon to expose the American horror of lynching, forever changing the fight for justice. Ida Bell Wells was born enslaved in Holly Springs, Mississippi in 1862, just 6 months before the Emancipation Proclamation. Her parents, James and Lizzie, were politically active, instilling in young Ida the core values of education, religion, and the right to vote. The chaos of Reconstruction meant freedom was fragile, but the dream of equality was potent. Tragedy struck early. At age 16, both her parents and one of her siblings died in a yellow fever epidemic. Determined to keep her family intact, Ida stepped up. She lied about her age, secured a teaching certificate, and began working to support her younger siblings, a pattern of fierce self-reliance that defined her life. In 1884, while riding a train from Memphis, where she had moved for better teaching opportunities, Wells was ordered to move from the ladies' coach to the segregated car. She refused. When the conductor and 2 men tried to drag her out, she bit one of them. Instead of backing down, Wells sued the railroad company for violating her civil rights. She initially won the case, receiving a settlement. It was a stunning victory, a black woman successfully challenging a railroad in the South. Though the ruling was later overturned by the Tennessee Supreme Court, it was a crucial, defining moment. Ida B. Wells learned that the system could be fought, and she had the temperament to fight it. Disillusioned by the corruption and lack of true justice in the court system, Wells turned to journalism. She began writing columns under the pseudonym Eola, her incisive articles quickly gaining national attention in black newspapers. She soon became a part owner of the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight newspaper. This was where she truly found her calling. Her columns were fearless, exposing everything from segregated schools to the moral hypocrisy of white leaders. She was becoming a voice for the voiceless, but her true baptism by fire was yet to come. In 1892, her world fractured. 3 of her close friends, Tom Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Will Stewart, opened a successful grocery store near a white-owned store in Memphis. The white store owner instigated a mob, and the 3 men were dragged from jail and brutally lynched. This was not a sensational crime story. It was a personal attack on black economic success and dignity. For Wells, it shattered the lie that lynching was about protecting white womanhood or punishing crime. She saw it for what it was: economic and racial terrorism. From that moment, her focus shifted entirely. She would dedicate her life to exposing this American horror. Wells launched a radical, unprecedented investigative campaign. She began traveling across the South, often disguised or under assumed identities, collecting facts, names, and statistics related to every recorded lynching. She meticulously pored over court transcripts, death records, and newspaper accounts. Her findings were explosive. The vast majority of victims were not accused of sexual crimes against white women, as the public was told. They were killed for things like insulting a white person, business competition, or simply refusing to give up their land. Wells published her findings in a powerful editorial in the Memphis Free Speech, daring black people to leave the city in protest. Her words were a call to action and a direct challenge to the entire power structure of the South. Her editorial infuriated the white community. While she was away on a speaking tour in New York, a white mob descended upon the Memphis Free Speech office. They vandalized and destroyed the press, declaring that if Wells ever returned to Memphis, she would be lynched. Ida B. Wells was now in exile. She never returned to Memphis, but her voice only grew louder. She moved to New York and began writing and publishing her seminal work, A Red Record, 1895, a statistical and analytical look at lynching in America since the Emancipation Proclamation. The pamphlet was a devastating expose. It proved with unassailable data that lynching was a premeditated method of maintaining white supremacy through terror. She documented over 10,000 lynchings between the years of 1865 and 1894. Realizing that American media ignored her, Wells took her message overseas. She embarked on 2 speaking tours of Great Britain and Scotland, finding that the British public was horrified by her findings. This was strategic genius. Wells knew that international condemnation could put pressure on American politicians and institutions. Her international campaign was highly controversial, but it succeeded in framing lynching as a barbaric human rights issue, not just an American problem. In 1895, Wells married civil rights attorney Ferdinand L. Barnett and moved to Chicago. She balanced her work with raising 4 children, proving that activism and family could coexist. In Chicago, she remained a political powerhouse, continuing her investigative journalism. She also focused on direct action, working tirelessly to integrate local institutions and combat residential segregation. Wells was a passionate advocate for women's suffrage, but she was often met with racism from white suffragists, who feared alienating Southern supporters if they included black women. In 1913, during the massive woman suffrage procession in Washington, D.C., white organizers insisted black participants march in the back. Wells defiantly refused, waiting until the procession began and then joining the Illinois delegation near the front, walking alongside her white peers. She insisted that justice for women must include justice for all women. Wells was a founder of the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, in 1909. However, her radicalism and uncompromising demand for immediate action often put her at odds with more moderate leaders, including W.E.B. Du Bois. She preferred direct, grassroots action and later founded the Negro Fellowship League, focusing on providing shelter, jobs and support for migrating African Americans. Wells consistently believed that power was built from the ground up, not just in the boardroom. Wells passed away in 1931, but the legacy of her investigative work remains her most profound contribution. Her methodology, using irrefutable facts and statistics to expose systemic injustice, became the blueprint for future civil rights leaders, including Thurgood Marshall and Martin Luther King Jr. She defined the essential relationship between truth, publicity, and justice, She proved that the truth, no matter how dangerous, is the most powerful weapon against oppression. For decades, Ida B. Wells was often overlooked by history. Her radical truth-telling deemed too intense for the mainstream narrative. But in the 21st century, her pioneering work has finally been recognized. She was a woman ahead of her time, a force of nature who insisted that America live up to its constitutional promises. Her life is a powerful reminder that history is often changed not by those who are comfortable, but by those who are unbought and unafraid to speak truth to terror. The story of Ida B. Wells is the story of America's fight for its soul. If you were captivated by the life of this fearless journalist, please like this video and subscribe to Lives in Time. Your support helps us uncover more vital and untold biographies, from the founding of empires to the heroes of the civil rights era. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the figures who truly shaped the world.